Simon Peter. Simon Peter, the man Jesus called the Rock, became the recognized leader of the apostles. After Pentecost, he preached boldly across Judea and later in Rome, where the message of Jesus was beginning to take root. But his ministry unfolded during the reign of Emperor Nero, a ruler infamous for his cruelty and paranoia. In 64 AD, a great fire ravaged Rome. To deflect blame from himself, Nero accused the Christians of arson, unleashing a brutal wave of persecution. Peter was arrested, imprisoned, and eventually sentenced to death. According to early Christian accounts, he refused to be crucified in the same manner as his Lord. Instead, he requested to be crucified upside down, believing himself unworthy to die as Jesus did. His execution marked one of the first great martyrdoms of the church. From that act of humility and faith, Peter became a lasting symbol of courage under persecution. His tomb beneath St. Peter's Basilica remains one of Christianity's holiest sites, the place where the rock of the church gave his final testimony through death. Andrew, the brother of Peter, took the gospel far beyond Judea. Known as the first called, he carried Jesus' teachings to regions of Greece and Asia Minor. His preaching gained many followers, but it also provoked anger among local authorities and pagan priests, who saw his message as a threat to the old religions. Eventually, Andrew was arrested in the city of Patron, Greece. Instead of renouncing his faith, he welcomed his sentence, crucifixion. But Andrew requested a different kind of cross, one shaped like an X, declaring himself unworthy to die in the same manner as Jesus. He was not nailed but tied with ropes, prolonging his suffering for 2 days. Even as he hung there, he continued to preach to the onlookers who gathered. His final act turned his death into a sermon, one of endurance and faith. The cross he died on, now known as the saltire, became a powerful Christian symbol and later the national emblem of Scotland. James the Greater. James, the son of Zebedee, was among the first disciples Jesus called, and one of his closest companions, alongside Peter and John. He witnessed key moments: the raising of Jairus' daughter, the transfiguration, and Jesus' agony in Gethsemane. After Jesus' resurrection, James preached boldly in Jerusalem, even as opposition to the new faith grew fierce. In 44 AD, King Herod Agrippa I, seeking favor with the Jewish authorities, ordered James's execution. He became the first apostle to be martyred, beheaded by the sword. According to early accounts, the man who accused James was so moved by his unwavering faith that he converted on the spot and was executed beside him. Centuries later, a tradition claimed that James's remains were carried to Spain, where they now rest in Santiago de Compostela. His tomb became one of Christianity's most sacred pilgrimage sites, the endpoint of the Camino de Santiago, ensuring that his martyrdom continues to inspire millions. John the Beloved. John, the brother of James, lived a different fate. Known as the beloved disciple, he was the only apostle who stood at the foot of the cross as Jesus was crucified, and to him, Jesus entrusted the care of his mother, Mary. John became a key leader in the early church, writing profound teachings about love, light, and truth. But under the Emperor Domitian, followers of Jesus again faced violent persecution. John was arrested and, according to early tradition, subjected to boiling in oil, but miraculously survived. Unable to kill him, the Romans exiled him to the barren island of Patmos, where he received divine visions that became the Book of Revelation. After Domitian's death, John returned to Ephesus, where he lived to an old age, the only apostle to die peacefully. He spent his final years teaching the next generation of believers, and his writings became some of the most influential texts in Christian theology. His life ended not in blood, but in testimony, the last living witness to Jesus among the 12. If you're finding this journey through history powerful, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more biblical explainers just like this. It helps more people discover these incredible stories of faith and sacrifice. Philip was one of the earliest followers of Jesus and played a vital role in spreading his message to distant regions. Known for his deep understanding of scripture and persuasive teaching, Philip journeyed to Phrygia, in what is now modern-day Turkey, where he performed miracles and converted many to the faith. However, his growing influence angered both Roman officials and local pagan priests, who viewed his preaching as a direct threat to their authority. Philip was eventually arrested in the city of Hierapolis and sentenced to death. According to early Christian tradition, he was crucified upside down on an X-shaped cross, similar to his fellow apostle Andrew. Even as he hung there in agony, Philip continued to preach forgiveness and the love of Jesus to those watching. Some accounts record that his followers later removed his body and buried him in Hierapolis, where his tomb remains a sacred site to this day, a lasting symbol of courage and conviction in the face of persecution. Bartholomew, also known as Nathaniel, was one of the most devout of the apostles, though little is written about him in scripture. After Jesus' resurrection, Bartholomew is said to have traveled far and wide, to regions such as India, Mesopotamia, and Armenia, bringing the gospel to people who had never heard it before. In Armenia, he converted King Ptolemus and much of his court to the faith, but his success came at a cost. The pagan priests, furious at losing their influence, convinced the king's brother that Bartholomew was dangerous. Soldiers were sent to arrest him, and he was condemned to one of the most horrific deaths recorded in Christian history. Bartholomew was flayed alive, his skin torn from his body, before being beheaded. Despite unimaginable suffering, he never renounced his faith in Jesus. His body was later taken to Rome, where his relics rest in the Basilica of St. Bartholomew on the Tiber Island, a memorial to unshakable devotion even in death. Thomas, often remembered as Doubting Thomas, became one of the most determined missionaries of them all. After initially questioning Jesus' resurrection, Thomas's faith became stronger than ever. According to early records, he traveled farther than any of the other apostles, reaching the distant lands of India. There, he preached the message of Jesus and founded several early Christian communities, converting many to the faith. But his growing influence angered local Brahmin priests, who saw his teachings as a threat to their traditions. One day, as Thomas prayed in a cave near modern-day Chennai, assassins were sent to silence him. A spear was thrust into his side, echoing the wound Jesus received on the cross. Thomas fell to the ground, praying until his final breath. His legacy endures through the St. Thomas Christians of India, who trace their faith directly to his mission. His remains are believed to rest in the Santoma Basilica in Chennai, a monument to the apostle who carried the gospel farther than anyone else and sealed it with his blood. Matthew, once a tax collector despised by his own people, became one of the most dedicated followers of Jesus. After witnessing the resurrection, he devoted his life to documenting Jesus' teachings and ministry. His writings would later become the Gospel of Matthew, one of the 4 cornerstone accounts of Jesus' life. Matthew's missionary work led him far from Judea, eventually reaching Ethiopia, where he preached to both the nobility and the common people. His message spread rapidly, and even a local king converted to the faith. However, his growing influence angered the region's pagan priests, who saw their authority slipping away. They persuaded the new ruler to silence Matthew. According to tradition, Matthew was stabbed to death with a sword while leading a church service. His blood stained the very altar where he had just proclaimed the love of Jesus. Though his life was cut short, his gospel would live on for generations, shaping Christian theology and guiding believers around the world. Today, he is honored as the patron saint of tax collectors and accountants, a powerful reminder that even those once rejected by society can become instruments of God's purpose. James the Less, sometimes called James the son of Alphaeus, was among the quieter apostles, but his faith and leadership made him essential to the early church in Jerusalem. As persecution against followers of Jesus intensified, James guided believers through turbulent times. According to early traditions, he was eventually brought before the Sanhedrin, the same council that condemned Jesus. He was ordered to deny his faith publicly from the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem. Instead of denying Jesus, James boldly proclaimed his love for and faith in Jesus and God. In fury, the priests threw him from the temple roof. Miraculously, he survived the fall and began praying for his attackers, asking God to forgive them. Moments later, a man struck him on the head with a club, ending his life. James's final act, praying for those who killed him, echoed the mercy Jesus showed on the cross. Though less remembered than others, James's leadership helped secure the foundations of the early church in its most fragile years. Thaddeus. Jude, also known as Thaddeus, was one of Jesus's most faithful yet lesser-known apostles. He is often confused with Judas Iscariot, but his story is one of hope and endurance, not betrayal. After Jesus' resurrection, Jude traveled to Persia with Simon the Zealot, where they spread the gospel together. Their mission led to countless conversions, but it also angered the region's pagan leaders, who feared losing their religious power. According to church tradition, both men were arrested and sentenced to death for refusing to renounce Jesus. Jude was beaten to death with a club, while Simon was killed either by crucifixion or by the sword. Their deaths were meant to destroy the faith they preached, but instead, it spread even farther. Jude's name became associated with perseverance through despair. Over the centuries, he came to be known as the patron saint of lost causes, a title fitting for an apostle who never gave up, even in the face of death. Their relics were later moved to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, where they remain as a testament to faith that endures beyond suffering. Simon the Zealot. Simon the Zealot was known for his passionate and fiery spirit. Before following Jesus, he had been part of a revolutionary Jewish movement that sought to overthrow Roman rule. Yet after meeting Jesus, his zeal was redirected from rebellion to faith. Simon's devotion and energy became tools for spreading the gospel to distant lands. After Jesus' resurrection, Simon traveled widely. Some accounts say to Persia, others suggest Egypt or North Africa, preaching with boldness and conviction. Eventually, he reunited with Jude Thaddeus in Persia, where the two worked side by side, converting thousands to the faith. Their growing influence, however, alarmed local pagan priests who saw them as a threat to their authority. They convinced the Persian king to have the apostles executed. According to tradition, Simon was either crucified or sawn in half, enduring an excruciating death. Yet he never renounced Jesus. His life stands as an example of transformation, from a revolutionary fighting for political freedom to a disciple fighting for spiritual truth. His martyrdom, shared with Jude, became a symbol of loyalty even unto death. Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot, by contrast, is remembered for betrayal rather than devotion. Once a trusted disciple, he was responsible for managing the group's finances. Judas walked beside Jesus, witnessed his miracles, and heard his teachings firsthand. Yet, driven by greed, disappointment, or perhaps confusion, he conspired with the chief priests to hand Jesus over for 30 pieces of silver. On the night of the Last Supper, Judas left the gathering, and later in the Garden of Gethsemane, he identified Jesus to the authorities with a kiss, the ultimate act of betrayal. When Jesus was condemned to death, guilt overwhelmed Judas. The silver coins, once so tempting, became unbearable to him. He threw the money back into the temple, crying out in regret. The priests refused to take it, calling it blood money. But throughout history, many have questioned Judas's true motive. Some theologians suggest that Judas's betrayal may not have been rooted in simple greed, but in misguided faith. He may have truly believed that Jesus was the promised Messiah and sought to force his hand, to provoke a confrontation that would reveal his divine power and establish his kingdom. In this interpretation, Judas wasn't trying to destroy Jesus, but to prove who he truly was. If that was his intent, then Judas's great tragedy was not only betrayal, it was a lack of trust in God's plan. He took matters into his own hands rather than allowing God's timing to unfold. Consumed by despair when events did not unfold as he expected, Judas went out and hanged himself. According to the Gospel of Matthew, the field purchased with that money became known as the Field of Blood, a grim reminder of his fate. Other accounts, like the Book of Acts, describe his death differently, but all agree on its tragedy. Unlike the other apostles, Judas's story ends not in martyrdom, but in remorse, a warning of how impatience, guilt, and lost faith can destroy even those who once walked closest to Jesus. The historical and spiritual legacy. The deaths of the apostles are among the most powerful testaments of faith in history. While the New Testament records glimpses of their struggles, much of what we know about their martyrdom comes from early Christian writings, church traditions, and historians such as Eusebius and Roman chroniclers like Tacitus and Suetonius. These sources confirm that followers of Jesus faced relentless persecution, particularly under emperors like Nero, who blamed them for disasters such as the Great Fire of Rome. Rather than extinguishing their faith, persecution made it stronger. Each apostle's death became a rallying point for believers, proving that the message of Jesus was worth dying for. Within 3 centuries, the same Roman Empire that executed them would legalize Christianity under Emperor Constantine and eventually adopt it as its official religion. Their martyrdoms laid the foundation of a faith that would outlast empires, wars, and centuries of opposition. From fishermen and tax collectors to saints and martyrs, these 12 men transformed the world through courage, conviction, and unshakable belief. Their lives remind us that true faith demands perseverance, sacrifice, and absolute trust in God's plan. They walked with Jesus, preached his message, and gave their lives to preserve it, turning suffering into the cornerstone of a movement that continues to inspire billions around the world today. If you found this story inspiring, share this video to spread awareness of the apostles' courage and devotion. And remember to subscribe for more powerful deep dives into biblical history, faith, and timeless truth.